Welcome, boys and girls, to another beautiful episode. Cup of Nurses, episode 47. How we doing? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in with us on this amazing day. Whoever's listening, wherever you are, we appreciate you guys downloading episodes. And don't forget to shoot the 5 stars, give us a review. And if this podcast provides any value, please share with your friends and family. It means the world to us.
And don't forget to check out Frontline Warriors. Awesome movement we got going on. Some cool stuff coming out. But as always, we have a very interesting episode this time around. We're going to talk about the GMO mosquitoes that are going to be introduced and released into Florida for the first time. And we're also going to talk about the gut microbiome and how it influences blood pressure and maybe causing hypertension. And it's crazy because I looked into some stats, and there's about 20% of people that are not able to be treated for their blood pressure by the regular standards or protocols that we have.
So through pharmaceuticals.
Exactly, yeah, through pharmaceuticals. So out of all our people that have hypertension, 20% of them, we can't figure out why we can't get the blood pressure down, and our medication isn't working on them. So that's kind of why we wanted to bring this up. And then the other one is GMO mosquitoes, another mind-blowing thing. This is completely new, and this is going to be done for the first time in the United States ever.
And we're officially changing ecosystems with like what's happening, and it's just crazy to just get into it, understanding that this passed through the EPA and everything, and we've decided to change the DNA of a species of mosquitoes, and now we're going to see the benefits and the risks of this.
Super interesting because, like Matt said, they take a specific type of mosquito and then they change up his DNA, and this one is actually the Aedes mosquito. There's so many mosquito types out there. So you might ask, why did we decide to target this specific one? We targeted this one because even though it only makes up 4% out of all the mosquitoes in the Keys, seems pretty small compared to the 96% that are non-Aedes. But these mosquitoes have been shown to be the most disease-carrying and infectious ones in that area. So this is like a good place to start. Now, what's also interesting about these is that we're only mutating the male DNA because the females are the only ones that are able to suck on human blood. So the males actually just get the nutrition from nectar, and the females are the ones that are actually
transmitting the disease and everything.
Correct. So what they do is they genetically modified a kill switch in the male mosquito that doesn't affect the male, but affects the females. So they pass off this genetic material, the genetic kill switch. So once only a female reaches a certain milestone in their larva and their development, they automatically die. But the males survive. So ideally, they're trying to decrease the amount of females and increase the amount of males to kind of depopulate those mosquitoes.
Yeah, let's just wrap that around our minds that like we have the ability to switch DNA and make this killer switch in the genome of a freaking mosquito, and they don't reproduce. And then we're gonna have a bunch of males of this species, which is not going to be able to transmit Zika, yellow fever, and all the other viruses that this specific type of virus is causing issues. And the only repercussion of this is figuring out what is going to happen to the ecosystem, right? What are the repercussions of not having mosquitoes in nature? Is it the algae that they're consuming? I'm not familiar with the mosquitoes in their life.
Yeah, I feel you. And it's interesting to look at because this could be like a ripple effect.
Yes.
You genetically modify one organism to depopulate it, and organisms that are eating that mosquito, that are relied on their life, they are going to be affected as well. So we might see another decrease in the population of certain animals that only eat these Aedes mosquitoes, because maybe there's not going to be enough of these in the population to feed all these animals, right? Because you're wiping out the females, so they're not going to reproduce as much, so you're dropping it. Yes. So that's going to affect them. And then whatever animal eats that animal,
like
it's
a
going
bat,
to affect it.
For example.
And it keeps going to who knows? It might affect us directly in a million years or in 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's what it is, that ripple effect that you notice. It's like the drop of water, correct? But unfortunately, in this ripple effect, it's not going perfectly circular. It's affecting different things. Just like in this aspect, the bats might suffer, and that's a whole chain reaction of maybe crickets are going to be over-infesting the lands now because there's a decrease in bats. Scientists can't predict those things till we see it in full effect. So, hey, Florida's releasing these mosquitoes. In the next few years, we're going to see, just like with everything, the repercussion of the progressive mentality of trying to better society by genetically modifying mosquitoes.
Right. So it's pretty interesting to see what's going to happen. It could have a very big upside, but there's also a negative side when we do things. So I was actually curious on how people figure out which kind of new technology to bring about, because this is new technology, the
Yes.
GMO mosquitoes. So I actually looked at some regulatory structure that are required, and there's actually 4 pillars in this. So people bring out these ideas how to create new technology or how to bring it to fruition. It has to have these 4 things. One of them is public health. So is there a need for it? Number 2 is a regulatory, which is may it be done. Number 3 is social, should it be done? And scientific is number 4, can it be done? So it has to answer all these questions for it to be considered something that's going to be released into the community, into the society.
And one of those things, just for reference of GMO organisms, is like crops, for example. We've genetically modified corn and soybeans and stuff like that. And now we're seeing that we're monocropping. And what is monocropping affecting? Now we're getting less nutritious fruits and vegetables because we're depleting the soil. And that's a repercussion to our health now. Now we have poor gut microbe, which is going to tie into the next topic. And it's this snowball effect that we're experiencing in society.
It's crazy to think about. And like you said, you tie it nicely to the gut biome, which is our next point I want to bring up, how the gut biome has potential effects on blood pressure. There's some studies out there that are showing the importance of gut biome. And of course, what builds up the gut biome is the foods that you eat. So we're holistic beings, so we rely on everything in nature to sustain us, right? So this regarding the gut biome and the gut biome and hypertension is some studies are actually showing that the gut biome health and structure is directly correlated with hypertension. So ultimately, it's also showing that whatever you eat is also an influence in your blood pressure, in your heart disease, and in your heart health. And that's just something mind-blowing because we've always looked at as cardiac disease from a different standpoint. We never tied it into gut microbe.
No,
And
it's always the pump and the the pipes.
And how we talked in the beginning of the episode that 20% of people that have hypertension are unable to be treated with antihypertensive medications. Maybe those people need a adjustment in a gut biome and a gut health, and that might be the solution to their hypertension.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about this because we're realizing more and more, and we're gonna have a full episode about the gut microbe that we're gonna release in the future.
It's mind-blowing.
We're planning on getting some kits for ourselves. There's different kind of kits we're gonna compare in the next couple of days. The best ones, we're gonna purchase it. We're gonna send out a sample to the lab, and we're gonna actually do a deep dive into gut microbe, the diversity, the microbiota, everything, how it has its effects, and we're gonna actually compare our results and see what we need to work on. For example, because sometimes you might have increased like metabolic oxalate levels, and you have to stop eating those foods that have that, like eggs and peanut butter and everything, and that's going to reduce calcium, whatever that could prevent kidney stones. It also transforms the diversity of the gut microbiota.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like the study in the gut, how something that's so overlooked, because no one really cares too much about GI health, just because it's kind of gross and it's something almost taboo to talk about. But I like how there's more relevant and more research coming, not relevant, but how there's more relevant research coming out regarding the gut health and the gut microbiome and how it affects your brain, your heart now, the way you live, and your overall health.
And more, it's like these critters, these trillion critters that are in your gut, they're almost pulling the levers on the human body. So it's like you have your consciousness that's aware of yourself, you're aware of your body,
right?
But now you have to be aware of what you're consuming because, hey, that gut microbe is pulling levers. And now it's freaking hypertension. Like, what? That's a trip, man.
You know what's an interesting concept to look at is how we are humans on a giant ecosystem of Earth.
Yes.
And our bodies are an Earth for these microorganisms. Like, they live on us and inside us, the same way we live on the Earth. So your body is literally almost like a temple.
So it's like, how are you going to treat the city that's inside?
Right.
Because if you're treating it bad and you're eating processed foods, that's changing the system of it. It's like almost like humans, correct? Mm-hmm. The way to think about the gut microbe, it's like society. We have processed foods. Now we have an epidemic of obesity, diabetes. Now these people are sick, very susceptible to viruses. Now we have a pandemic. There's people dying. Mm-hmm. And look what our gut microbe doing. It's like introducing an antibiotic. It's just killing a bunch of things. what are the repercussions of now introducing antibiotics long term to the body? C. diff. Like it's crazy. Everything comes full circle in this.
Yeah, it's super interesting to look at. And Matt and I looked at some studies regarding this and how are they conducting this research. And we have a bunch of these studies on our show notes. If you guys are very interested, we always have links on our show notes regarding the studies. But one study that we looked at actually demonstrated that high blood pressure is associated with gut microbiota dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is a miscommunication, just the organisms in your gut aren't in the proper locations within the proper amounts. And what they were talking about is the nutrition that you consume affects your gut biome, creates it what it is, which internally affects your blood pressure. A lot of people think that, hey, they eat healthy, and the healthy food is what gets them these antihypertensive effects. That's true, but the food that you consume actually affects your gut flora, which then dictate the blood pressure issues.
Yes.
So ultimately, if you eat a healthy diet, that indirectly changes your blood pressure, but directly changes your gut flora, which then directly changes your blood pressure and your cardiac disease.
Yeah, I'm gonna share like a quick little story where it became very self-aware of this with the gut microbe. It's like when I was in Poland, but prior to that, I was in 8th grade and I had my appendix taken out. I got peritonitis, needed a PICC line, had long-term IV antibiotics. I went to Poland a couple years later, and there's a change of atmosphere. I'm also human, so I'm getting affected by the atmosphere, but my gut microbe is getting affected as well. And I had crazy stomach pains. I went to the Polish hospital. They didn't know what was going on with me. They wanted to GI scope me. Didn't want to do that, refused that. Went to a special doctor, Chinese medicine, that took a blood sample and ran it underneath a microscope, and he saw that my GI tract is like upset. Like you need to reintroduce different foods. I went on a special cleanse, took specific pills, and that's when I became aware that like, wow, yes, you have the body, and if you work out, that helps you, but also you have the microbe, and that upset me. That created nausea, vomiting in my body.
It's so interesting how we're just one giant ecosystem, living in a one giant ecosystem, right?
And then, yeah, and that goes with like the brand that we're creating, because everything comes full circle between like the mind, body, and spirit. You take off, you upset one or the other, and it gets affected. And same thing here, as we're talking about.
You're just like in like an uncontrolled rhythm almost, like a dysrhythmia. Like think about your heart rate and like your sinus rhythm, tachycardia, things like that. They're all dysrhythmias. They're throwing it off balance. And we talked about a few episodes back the vibration theory. How we're all vibrating. Well, there's different ways of vibrating, and if you're not vibrating at a proper frequency, then you're not going to be as healthy as you can be. And it goes back to the whole holistic approach. But that's just like a little theory of vibration.
Yeah, it's it's a tidbit.
Yeah, another study that we looked at was actually very interesting. It actually looked at intermittent fasting and how it affects your gut flora, which then internally affects blood pressure. So what this study did is, it was with some rats and some humans, but with the rats, what they did is they took a rat with like a blank gut, so they have no gut microorganisms, and they took out the gut flora from a rat that had hypertension and introduced it into this clean gut. And then another sample, they took the gut flora from non-hypertensive rats and introduced it to this clean gut. And what it showed is that if you introduce the hypertensive flora from the gut of the rat that had hypertension into the clean rat, it gets hypertension. And then for the one that got the gut microbes from the non-hypertensive rat, stayed non-hypertensive. So it just shows that there's a correlation between certain amount of the organisms or certain type of organism in your gut that affect your blood pressure. So they're slowly able to kind of pinpoint which flora, which overgrowth, which undergrowth actually causes these blood pressure issues.
And I wonder if this is going to be introduced in the future to hospitals more, because that's completely disconnect. It's like thinking about how many of our patients have a probiotic added. Or maybe, do you ever hear a doctor talking about, maybe we should stop these antibiotics if the blood cultures are negative because we're ruining his gut microbe?
Yeah.
We're not talking about that.
Right.
And then these patients are on, anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants, and like the list keeps on going.
Yeah.
And I loved how we've also mentioned like intermittent fasting here, and there's a bias because we practice it religiously almost. We do it every day, but this is just another factor that like you need to have the approach of eat, stop, eat.
Yeah.
And just because breakfast we have the assumption that time is relevant. So breakfast has to be always in the morning and you have to eat it no matter what. If you don't feel hungry, don't force yourself. I'm working 12-hour shifts and I'm not consuming food the first thing in the morning, and I feel fine. It's just not how I'm operating.
Right. I was listening to a podcast, the Tom Bilyeu one with the guy that's talking about the gut microbiota. He said that one of the main issues he has in his clinic is constipation. That not being the typical constipation you think of, where you have trouble taking a poop, but the one that you never fully empty yourself. Whereas where it's unhealthy for people to always be at 30%, right? Because they never empty completely.
Yes.
And it's really cool to look at it. We'll probably take a look into it, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I feel like we're going to create another episode regarding the whole gut health.
Exactly.
So I don't want to jump too much into it. I feel like we could save it for next episode and go into it more detailed. But it was very interesting to hear that the GI doctor just speak on the parts of gut health. He even mentioned that he just needs 3 things from you to find your main issue. He needs a CT scan, an endoscopy, and a colonoscopy. And then he also needs your signs and symptoms of how you're feeling and what's going on. And he could figure out what you need to improve in your gut.
Yeah, one thing that blows my mind thinking about the hospital setting and the gut microbe is also like sepsis, for example. We know that chronic inflammation ruins the gut lining where it creates space, and all these opportunistic bacteria are able to pass through the gut lining into the bloodstream. And then we have sepsis, and we're wondering how are these people getting sick? And it could just be all internal.
Right, it could all stem from the gut. It's crazy. And you know how bad it gets if someone perfs their bowel. That's just, that could go wrong real quick. And that could be super damaging. You can never know what could happen.
And that was my experience on my appendix perf.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's how you get peritonitis. It's just leaking shit. Technically, that's your whole body's sterile except for its gut. If you want to think about the whole GI tract, think about it as an independent person from the body. It enters through the mouth, leaves through the rectum, but it never touches the internal body. We just absorb nutrients from it through the GI tract.
Yeah, that's crazy. And they say the majority of your immune system is also located in your GI tract, which makes sense because that's where all the foreign objects are going into.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. See you in a couple of days, maybe a week. Maybe you could listen to another of our older episodes, every day.
This is a quick one. You're going to be like, whoa, you guys are over? Yes, we are. See you guys next week. Thank you guys for listening as always. Peace, love.
Bye-bye. Peace.